I wonder if you ever thought about the fact that what Adam and Eve lost in the garden was a temptation that was offered to Jesus. And you want to stay tuned for the show today, because we're going to be talking about the War of the Worlds in our series Against the Current and the impact of the culture wars. And of course, I'm John Muncie, and with me is my dear friend Mike Richardson. How in the world are you doing, my friend?
Really good. Really good, really good. The War of the Worlds.
Yeah,
you come up with these hooks,
Yeah.
and I always kind of word, how are you going to tie that in? And then you always do, brother. So we've been talking about the culture war, and the War of the Worlds. I love it.
Yeah. Well, I knew you'd be a big sci-fi guy.
Well, I am, of course. Yeah.
And of course, that was who was the guy that did that many years ago, back in the 30s on
the radio.
Yeah, it was man, I can't even think of his name off the top of my head right now.
I can't either, but yeah.
But he,
of course,
Orson Welles.
Orson Welles. Yeah, everybody's screaming at their computer. Orson Welles.
Yeah. Thank you for all of that. Of course, the impact of that radio show was quite interesting because, and I've done a bunch of research on that, simply because it was on Halloween that he did this production.
Yeah.
And it was just a big joke, and but what he had done was give off the impression that we were truly being invaded by aliens. And people did crazy stuff, Mike. Some people people actually killed themselves thinking that the aliens were coming into their city and all that. But it does show the impact again of the media and the arts. And that's what we've been talking about for several weeks now. And again, explain for those that may be newcomers to our show, what in the world is meant by Against the Current?
Well, Against the Current, it started when I first got saved years ago. You were attacking everything that I held dear in my heart. And you, especially the one thing that really, I'll never forget this, is that I learned how to play guitar by watching and listening to John Denver.
Yeah.
And you started telling me all the things that he was into and why I ought not listen to that and why you were against it. And you were against everything I wanted to do, But then,
how old were you then, man?
I had to be, 17 or 18?
Wow.
Yeah, I wasn't married.
Wow.
I was just dating my wife, girlfriend.
Yeah.
And but then after I got older and realized it's like, you're not against everything.
Right.
But you've got to take a stand when you look at the current circumstances of our society, the current trends that are going on in the church. You've got to stand up and yell and wave a flag. We're against this. We've got to stop this. Especially this subject that we're on now, this culture war. If we don't stand up and yell and try to stop Christians from letting this alien, this enemy invade like Orson was, we don't stop this, then our next generation truly, truly will be lost.
And it is truly a war of the worlds, because there's two worlds going on here. And they're butting heads, and it's a very serious war. And it's interesting because when you look at Paul's description of the whole armor of God, before he begins to describe how we need to put on this armor, he uses the word world in a sentence that refers to a dark world. And here's what it says: "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood," meaning we're not in a human fight going here, but against principalities, against powers, against rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Now, those descriptions are very interesting. It would be neat to sometime do a show just on those principalities and powers and rulers and wicked spirits and how that plays. But it says that these are the rulers of the darkness of this world. Right. And it's talking about not the planet Earth. When it says this world, it's talking about the culture, talking about the social system that is in this world's system. And yet when we know the rulers of darkness, the demonic forces, are just as real as flesh and blood is. This is a real combat. This is a real war. It's not on the level that sometimes we can see it all the time and sense it with our five senses. But Mike, it's as real as our natural world is real, And so when we find Jesus being tempted the very first time, it's when he had been fasting. He was seeking the Father, and he set aside food for a period of time there in Matthew chapter 4. But then in verse 8, if you look at the scripture here, it says, "And the devil taketh him up into an exceedingly high mountain." Now, just that alone, I don't know if you've ever really thought about that, Mike. He's literally Jesus is being caught away into an exceedingly high mountain. Now, some people think that this explains what's going on here, but there's no mountain that you could stand on that would do what it says here.
Right.
It says, "The devil taketh him up to the exceedingly high mountain," and then it says, "It showeth him all the kingdoms of the world and the glory of them." Now, obviously, you could be on the tallest mountain in the world and still not be able to see all the kingdoms. So what he was seeing, and I believe it was the first display before we have LED displays and all this. Satan came up with some kind of spectrovision, some kind of
IMAX.
Yeah. And before his eyes, because it says it showeth him. In other words, he was able to see. Jesus was able to see flash before his eyes, almost kind of like a big screen television, all the kingdoms of the world. And then it says, "and the glory of them." Mm-hmm. It doesn't say the gory of them. It says the glory of them. Now, who's ruling these kingdoms? Well, according to the scripture, the principalities and the powers, the rulers of darkness, right. This is a part of his system. And it says that he showed him the kingdoms of the world. And there's that word again. We're talking about a war of the worlds. Now, with that in mind, of course, we've talked now for all these weeks about the various types of conflicts and warfare that's going on here. But I wanted to go, especially in this session, about what that means. When it says the world, what does it mean? And I want you to look at this passage in 1 John, here in 1 John chapter 2. And, John, this is the guy that wrote the Gospel of John. This is the guy that wrote the book of Revelation. Here's these little tiny letters there right before Revelation. It says, "Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. For if any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him." So 3 times it uses the phrase the world, the world, the world. So, but he's saying that if you're in love with this world, you can't be in love with the Father. But somebody says, well, what does that mean? What does that mean, love not the world? Does that mean I can't love the mountains? I can't love the ocean? It has nothing to do with that at all. It's something completely different than the planet.
Correct. Has to be.
Yeah. So now he explains in the next verse, and it says, "For all that is in the world," there's that phrase again, and then what is in the world? 3 things: the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world. So you want to boil down what the world is made up of. It's made up of 3 things: the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. And of course, the point is, when Satan was trying to tempt Jesus with the world, he went for the second. He used all 3 of those temptations. If you remember, Jesus was tempted 3 times. At one time, he tempted him with the lust of the flesh. Hey, if you're really Son of God, take this stone, turn it into bread. Same thing Eve fell for. But it's interesting, when he presented her, it says, when she saw that the fruit was good and to make one wise, and that, the first thing, she saw it. And now, Here is the lust of the eyes. And, of course, obviously the pride of life. And those are the three temptations that were set before Jesus. Thank God he overcame the enemy. And even though you and I are facing this, we too can overcome in him.
You've got to stay around with this, because, we're not done with the war of the worlds yet. And because I think they're getting the picture that there is a war not only for their souls, but for their family souls.
Yes. Amen.
And the Bible addresses this.
Mm-hmm.
So stick around. There's more to come. You're listening to Against the Current. Welcome back, and thanks for sticking around for the second half of this 5-part series, hopefully to be concluded today, on the culture war that has crept in not only to our nation, but it has crept into the church. And sadly, as we've talked about over the last few weeks, that it appears that the church is losing the battle for the minds and the hearts of the next generation that's coming in behind us.
It's so sad.
And we just can't seem to communicate or compete with what the world has to offer. Mm-hmm. And it's through the eyes and through the ears that they're getting this foothold that you've been talking about.
Right.
And I can't help but wonder, John, even if the church would take the initiative and fight on the same battleground, the problem is the world is fighting with this high-tech, high-budget dollars, and we're still trying to teach our kids with flannel graphs.
Yeah.
And we can't compete.
Yeah.
But even when the world, or in the church, somebody comes up with an idea, they want to come up with a movie that would show godly values, Christian values. The church doesn't support them.
I know, it's so sad.
Well, because maybe they don't have the budget, and so it's not as good as acting, or the lighting is not as good, or the music score is not quite as good. And so here we are complaining that the world's taken over while we're standing in line at AMC theaters to buy the ticket for the very movie that we're complaining that's corrupting our culture.
Right.
Well, the Lord obviously addressed this, and many times you've been talking over this. Where are we going to go? What's the? If we're wrapping down on this last 9 minutes here.
Right.
What's the fix here? Where's it going to conclude?
Well, when it says, "Come out from among them and be ye separate," I think there is a level of godly sanctification, and the word sanctification is a word that scares people and they freak out on, but it just simply means something that's been. Oops, I got tangled up there. Something that's been separated from something and separated unto something else. So here we are as believers. We have been called out of the world so he can dump into our spirits and our hearts his truth, his way, so we can go back into the world and make an influence. Jesus said, I don't ask you, Father, to take them out of the world. I just ask you to keep them from the evil. I send them into the world just as you sent me into the world.
Right.
And so, I'm thinking that one of the sad parts is that when you look at movies that are, I don't know, recently, what was the Black Panther? What's a
several weeks ago that came out. Yeah.
And that's
superhero
been,
thing.
I mean, hugely successful film. And there's elements in that of the occult. I mean, they're calling on ancestral spirits to help raise him from the dead and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, people don't think a thing about that. And I mean, honestly, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. Mike, let's just say that, you know, before it's all said and done, you know, it's gonna be $800-900 million. I mean, we're talking close to $1 billion.
Yeah.
Would you not admit that there's going, if 1 out of every 10 people that see that would say, if you stopped them, are you a Christian? Are you a, well, sure, I'm a Christian, you know. So you could take that and say $100 million of that $1 billion film came out of the pocketbooks and billfolds of believers.
Yeah,
you know,
but
not
John,
that makes it bad. Okay.
No, I understand it. But John, you got to understand. When I watch the movie, I see the symbols and the stuff, and it doesn't bother me because I have the Holy Spirit indwelling in me. So that kind of stuff doesn't bother me.
Yeah. Well, that was what we were talking about last week with seeing and hearing and
right.
vexed by not. But you know, Mike. It's funny, you tell somebody not to do something, they'll want to do it. You know, it's just their nature.
Yeah.
You know, you tell, don't go see that movie. Well, that's the first thing they're going to do. You know?
Why? Why don't you want me to see it?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Don't think of a pink elephant.
Yeah.
Well, what's immediately pops in your mind, you know? But I tell you what's interesting. Last week, I think it was, you talked about people coming home from work, they're wore out, you know, and it's, you know, they've got a nice, comfortable couch, you know, and there's the television. It's always a joke. I tell people, you know, television has become an idol in the home. People say, it's not an idol in my home. Well, then why is all your furniture facing it? You know? So you lay down in that easy chair or whatever right there, click on the button. And really what it is, we're addicted to amusement. And the word amusement, it breaks down into 2 words. It literally means without amusement, without thinking, without knowledge. The word muse means to think. Mm-hmm. So amusement literally says, we'll do the thinking for you. You just come, you sit down there and you turn it on, and we'll tell you what to think. We'll tell you what's good for you. We'll tell you what's funny. We'll tell you, and if it doesn't seem funny to you, we'll put a laugh track in the background and make sure you know laugh. Where we'll kind of, you know, help you know where to laugh at. You know, we'll kind of, you know, what's the word? We'll spare, you know, we'll spark your attention there, and we'll tell you what's good for you. We'll tell you what's bad for you. We'll tell you how to dress, how to look, how to drink. You know, and when you're lonely, you can do this. When you're busy, whatever, and then you can even bring your kids in and let them sit there and let them laugh at all that. And when it's all said and done, there's it's funny because we call it television program.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it is. It's programming an entire culture. And it's a part of the culture war.
See, the thing of it is, TV, in and of itself, it's an inanimate object.
Right.
It's not evil within itself.
Right.
It's what comes on, it's what we turn the channel on.
Yes.
And I can see the value in sitting down and back in the day watching an Andy Griffith program.
Right.
Okay, you always usually had a moral-based summation to the show.
Right.
You can enjoy that, and you're not against amusement. You're not
right.
against entertainment at all.
Right.
It's the quality. That's what we're trying to narrow this down. I'm not saying to throw your TV out, and that's not what you're saying either.
Right. Right.
We've got a big one in back of the stage. So
yeah.
It's what we're letting come in, and the problem is it has been so subtle and so slow, and we don't even know it.
Yes.
That we're so accustomed. We are so accustomed. I'm like, brother, this is a true fact. Somebody went and saw the movie I, Tonya. It was about the Tonya Harding, the skater.
Right.
Yeah. And I was asking, was there any cussing in it? And he goes, I mean, maybe a couple. I'm not really sure. Any sexual scenes? He's like, no, I don't think so. So I get on the review. 47 F words.
Oh, I know, man.
22 GDs.
Yes.
Because we're so desensitized. And I get it because I work in the world. Okay, I have a secular job too.
Right.
And you do get desensitized, but you don't even
right.
notice it.
Yeah, exactly.
And it just, but then.
See, now that says a lot right there. We are not paying attention. It's doing the thinking for it. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, the thing I wanted, because I know we're trying to wrap this up, I take my granddaughters to see the best movie that's ever been made in the history of all motion picture. It's called The Greatest Showman. Okay, in fact, I even conned you and your wife to go see it, and you're an anti-Hollywood.
Hallelujah.
In that movie, not the movie itself, but in the previews, I should say, there's a show that comes on, and it's called Love, Simon.
Yeah.
And it's about a young man who obviously is gay. He doesn't want anybody to know it, and nobody knows it. Then he comes out, and then you see that at the end, these two guys kissing, and it's all about this wonderful love story between these two young men. Mm-hmm. Now, that's going to be a topic for another day, of course. Mm-hmm. But my granddaughters were exposed to it. I had no clue.
Right.
That upsets me.
Yeah.
So now I have just pumped the imagery of, well, I guess two guys kissing is okay because Papaw took me to a movie.
Right.
And it was on the screen in the preview.
Yeah. And it vexed you, didn't it? It vexed you. It made you feel horrible.
Well, I started to say something. It did more than vex me.
Yeah.
But that's how this happens, subtly.
Yep.
And most people just go, yeah, Mike, come on, man. You see it every day. It ain't the big deal. I know. Just fluff it off.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, it's funny, Mike. How much time we got left?
1:05.
Okay, I've done this. You know me. I'm kind of a little gutsy every once in a while and bizarre sometimes. I literally did a message about this, and I brought 2 television sets, and I hooked them up, and I put one on one side of the pulpit and one on the other side of the pulpit, and I preached with both televisions on. And I think one of them might have been, both of them were secular stations.
Yeah.
And it's so funny watching the people as they're going like this, back and forth to the television. They're not paying attention to the thing I'm saying. And I'm letting it go. And I don't have any sound on. I'm just letting them...
Just the pictures.
Yeah, the pictures. And they cannot look at me. They're so engrossed in it. It's like they can't get away from it. And this is the kind of power that we're talking about. And think about it, Mike. Satan would be an idiot if he wouldn't try to get his hand in on that. Oh. This is crazy open opportunity to touch the minds of billions of people on the planet,
And the problem is the church has tried.
Yes.
And we've got the Christian networks, the TBN networks and stuff, but the problem is with that, what we call good Christian programming, Johnny, they're
just
that's another. I mean, I can't even watch most of it,
right? Because
it's just that's another.
It's TBN total biblical nonsense.
We probably could go another week on this, but you got 20 seconds.
Well, thank you all so much for being with us and watching what we had to say today. I hope that we've been able to say some things to make you think. That we're addicted to amusement. We need to be musing. We need to be thinking. And of course, we're going to be talking about other parts of this. And ask yourself this question: does my television or my music or whatever you want to talk in the amusement area, does it bring me closer to the heart of God, or is it driving me further from the heart of God? It's something for you to think about. God bless you.